Yeah, yeah. But if we go further down the river to the Broad Canal, which is just downriver from the Longfellow Bridge, we see this very industrial area, and that would have been early 19th century.
Well, the Broad Canal was built in originally in 1810, and what the projectors of the canal had in mind was making Cambridge a rival of Boston. This was to develop the port of Cambridge, and it never really succeeded in that respect. But the canal would be used eventually to transport goods and material into the factory district that arose in the Leachman section.
But of course, we have the Myron plant would be on that side here, and then to the right there would be the new Genzyme building. So much transformed, and there's going to be a boardwalk there that will link Cambridge Port and the Kendall Square area with the river. So much transformation has happened here.
And there was another canal a little bit further down the river called the Leachmere Canal, which is still largely intact. That's where the Galleria Mall is today, and the boats that go out on the river, the Charles River Boat Company, originate in that body of water.
Yeah. Well, let's jump up to the river again, to the Arsenal docks. Here we see this, again, a big boat that now, in this picture, this is in Watertown here.
This is in Watertown, and this is actually the first industrial facility to be established on the river in 1816. This is these buildings associated with the Watertown Arsenal. These were the gas plant buildings.
And explain why they placed the Arsenal up here and not in Cambridge Port. There was a military reason for that.
But for defensive purposes.
To get them away from the harbor.
Get them away from the harbor. And what's being manufactured here was being manufactured for use in the forts that were part of the defensive system in the harbor.
Yeah. And in order to get those boats up there, all the bridges had to open.
That's correct.
And
this is 1816 was the date of the establishment of the Watertown Arsenal.
Yeah, and this was not. These look very attractive, but actually the river was rather an open sewage, and you have a picture next that shows the vista of the river and of Mass General Hospital, but the smells and the water quality was not to be.
Well,
wouldn't allow residential.
As the 19th century went on, but I recall reading in one memoir that a gentleman in the 1830s was standing on the West Boston Bridge, and he could see seals cavorting in the river. Now that's in the 1830s. And as late as the 1850s, you had hunters coming to the Allston shore to hunt for ducks. So the river was still pretty natural, even in the middle of the 19th century. Yeah. But increasingly, as the years went by, it became, as more and more industrial facilities were established on the edge of the river, it became more and more polluted.
Now, I want to take us to a part in Allston Brighton that is they've given it a French word, the abattoir. And it looks almost like a university campus, but tell us about what happened in those buildings.
Well, the town of Brighton was the kind of center of the cattle and slaughtering industry for the whole New England region. So thousands of head of cattle were driven into Brighton or transported by rail to Brighton every year. And by the 1860s, there were 41 slaughterhouses in the town of Brighton. And a number of others in other communities in the general area. And the state became very concerned about the public health ramifications.
Yes.
And the Massachusetts Board of Health was established in 1869, and in 1871 they passed a law basically ordering that in the future all slaughtering be done in a consolidated modern facility. And
but there was still animal blood and animal parts still went into the river.
The river was not a matter of great concern.
No.
You know, and refuse, offal, was being dumped into the river, and that continued well into the 20th century.
Yeah. Give us a sense of this particular facility. What would be there today, so to orient us?
Well, this is where the Staples Office Supply Store and the Charles River Motel are situated in North Brighton.
The first Staples in America, so that has another first.
Another historical association.
Now you have another picture of a building that was right adjacent, a factory building that was right adjacent to the slaughterhouse, which shows the Charles River boats in the foreground.
Right, there was a dock. This was a 60-acre parcel, and this was a company that was associated with the abattoir, but was not actually directly connected to it, called the Bowker Fertilizer Company. And what they were doing was they were using animal byproducts, basically. A lot of the industry in Brighton in the 19th century was related to animal byproducts in one way or another. You have not only the dock with these massive vessels tied up at it, but also a spur of the Boston and Albany Railroad that came down to this facility and also service the main abattoir buildings. Main abattoir buildings had 14 slaughterhouses.
And when did the last slaughterhouse leave the Charles River?
The abattoir itself went out of existence about 1960.
1960.
Yeah, so that's quite right.
So that's why people still remember the blood coming down down the river. So there are people who remember
and the odors that were emanating from the abattoir.
From the
could
abattoir.
be quite powerful at times.
Yeah, isn't that an amazing part of history? It's hard to imagine that this happened not long ago. 50 years ago, there was still a slaughterhouses on the river. Well, let's go down river a little bit to the Weld Boat House and to the Anderson Bridge. And I think you will be speaking in a later program, you're speaking about the universities. So here we have a kind of a transition from industrial use to a more institutional use.
Right, and that will be a theme that I'll address in more detail in the next program. But what I wanted to underscore here was this is the site of the Great Bridge.
Which today is the Anderson Bridge that leads to the stadium and has the Weld Boat House here.
But this is before the construction of the Anderson Bridge. This is a wooden span that existed. The Anderson Bridge dates from, I think, about 1912, and this is 1905 approximately. And you can see various of the Harvard facilities, the Newell Boathouse and the Well Boathouse and the Harvard Stadium and the Carey's Cage, the athletic facilities of Harvard, have arisen in the neighborhood, but there also is a residential area down there where the business school now sits that was raised at the time in the 1926 when the Harvard School of Business Administration was built.
Yeah, yeah. And looking at some other dramatic bridges, there's the bridge that opened already in 1786. Was a very dramatic bridge, and it had its own actually pedestrian pathway on it, which I think is interesting now that the DCR restoring the bridges, and there's so much emphasis to also provide for pedestrian and bikes. To know that already in the late 18th century there was concern for the pedestrians.
That's true, and this was a great event in Boston. There was a parade, there were fireworks, there was a great celebration, the opening of this bridge. This is the second bridge in the tidal estuary part of the river, and it's 123 years since the construction of the Great Bridge, until we reach 1786 when the second bridge goes up.
It's a long time, yeah. So what bridge, in terms of location, give us a sense of where that...
Well, this is the Charlestown Bridge, basically.
Would be the Charlestown Bridge.
Yeah, and I think we're looking here toward Boston, I believe.
Toward Boston, yeah. So with Charlestown would be in the back, and we're looking towards what would be downtown north, the north end would be
Area,
there. Yeah.
right.